In the quiet of a market, a single moment transforms the life of a veteran forever. Donald Trump, walking the streets incognito, confronts an injustice he cannot ignore. It was a winter night in Philadelphia, the howling wind and swirling snow turning the city streets into an icy wilderness. People hurried to find warmth indoors, leaving the desolate corners to those struggling to survive. In one such corner, an elderly man sat huddled on a makeshift bed of cardboard. A worn blanket barely shielded him from the biting cold. His trembling hands and chapped lips spoke not just of physical pain but of emotional anguish. This man was Mark, an Afghanistan war veteran. Once a hero on the battlefield, he now fought for his life against the unforgiving winter. For 2 days, Mark had survived on nothing but a few sips of water. Hunger gnawed at his weakening body. Snow and ice clung to his tattered clothing, making every step feel heavier. His hollow stomach and weary frame sought respite, and his eyes caught sight of a dimly lit market down the street. Mark fixed his gaze on the light and drew a deep breath. "Maybe just a loaf of bread," he muttered to himself. With unsteady legs, he stood and began his slow, uneven march toward the market. Every step drained his remaining energy, but desperation kept him moving. At the same time, in the warmth of a luxurious Philadelphia hotel, Donald Trump stood by the window, restless. He had spent the day engaged in official duties, yet his mind was preoccupied. "I'm not seeing the real Philadelphia," he murmured. "I feel trapped within these 4 walls." Turning to his security team, he voiced an unexpected request. "I want to take a walk outside, anonymously." The team, though surprised, did not protest. Trump donned a dark coat, scarf, and hat to ensure no one would recognize him, then prepared to step into the night. The team departed discreetly through the hotel's rear exit in an unmarked car. They traveled to a modest neighborhood on the city's outskirts, leaving behind the bustling center. Trump signaled the driver to stop, stepping out onto the street. His security detail, dressed in plain clothes, followed at a distance while fully equipped backup teams stayed on standby further away. As Trump wandered the streets, dim streetlights cast a muted glow on the neighborhood's worn edges. He was observing the heart of Philadelphia when his attention was drawn to a man struggling to walk. Mark, with his battered coat and frostbitten hands, seemed out of place even in this forgotten corner of the city. Trump paused, watching silently. Mark reached the market's entrance and felt the wave of warm air brush against his face, a brief respite from the frigid outdoors. Yet, as he entered, a cloud of despair returned to his expression. Keeping his head low, he moved through the aisles, avoiding the gaze of other shoppers. Spotting the bread section, Mark made his way toward it. The aroma of fresh loaves filled the air, but his limited coins reminded him of his stark reality. "At least I can get 1 loaf," he thought. With trembling hands, he picked up a loaf of bread, holding it as though it were his lifeline. Reaching the register, Mark placed the bread on the counter and emptied his meager coins onto it. Speaking in a soft, shaky voice, he pleaded, "This is all I have. Please, may I buy just this bread?" The cashier, engrossed in their phone, glanced at him briefly before sweeping the coins aside. Without counting them, the cashier replied curtly, "This isn't enough. We're not running a charity here." Mark's face flushed with embarrassment. Bowing his head, he stammered, "Please, I'm just very hungry." The cashier interrupted him with a scoff, shaking their head. "Rules are rules. If you don't have the money, you don't belong here," they said sharply. From a distance, Trump had been quietly observing the interaction. The cashier's cold demeanor and Mark's desperate state stirred something within him. Fixing his gaze on Mark's tattered coat and frost-covered hands, Trump could no longer stand by. He stepped toward the register. Noticing the movement, a plainclothes security agent stationed outside swiftly entered the market. Disguised as a shopper, they positioned themselves near the back of the store, keeping a close eye on Trump and the unfolding scene. Trump reached the counter, where the cashier now shifted their focus to the unexpected figure before them. Reaching into his pocket, Trump pulled out a crisp $20 bill and placed it on the counter. In a calm yet resolute tone, he said, "I'll pay for the bread." The cashier, narrowing their eyes, scanned Trump's scarf-covered face suspiciously. With a hint of sarcasm, they asked, "Why are you paying for this guy's bread?" Locking eyes with the cashier, Trump replied firmly, "Because helping people is what we're supposed to do." The cashier muttered under their breath, snatched the bill, and rang up the sale. Handing the bread to Mark, they shot Trump a disdainful look. "Here's your bread," they said flatly. Mark, overwhelmed, turned to Trump with a mix of gratitude and shame. His voice trembled as he said, "Thank you. You didn't have to do this." With a slight smile, Trump gestured toward the door. "Let's step outside. I'd like to talk to you," he said. Mark hesitated briefly before following him out into the freezing night air. As the icy wind bit at their faces, Trump adjusted his scarf, while Mark limped slowly by his side. As Mark and Trump stepped into the icy Philadelphia night, the cold wind whipped against their faces. Mark's limp slowed his pace, and Trump adjusted his steps to match. The quiet of the streets made every sound, the crunch of snow underfoot, the whistle of the wind, amplified. Unbeknownst to Mark, one of Trump's security team members had discreetly exited the market behind them, maintaining a careful distance. Years of combat experience had sharpened Mark's instincts, and he quickly became aware of the subtle movement. He glanced over his shoulder, his senses on high alert. "Something's not right," Mark said softly, leaning slightly toward Trump. "I think someone's following us." Trump didn't flinch. "Don't worry," he replied calmly, gesturing toward a nearby bench. "Let's sit for a moment." Mark followed reluctantly, his eyes darting around the street. The pair sat down, the cold metal of the bench seeping through their clothes. Trump adjusted his scarf, while Mark, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, continued scanning his surroundings. Further down the street, the security detail maintained their positions. At the team leader's signal, a few agents moved closer, trying to stay inconspicuous. Mark's unease grew with each passing second. His mind, conditioned by years of combat, interpreted every movement as a potential threat. "Who are you?" Mark asked, his voice edged with suspicion. "And why are people watching us?" Trump met his gaze, his expression steady. "No one here means you harm. You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Mark hesitated, torn between his instincts and the stranger's composed demeanor. But before he could respond, a sudden shift in the nearby security team's positioning caught his eye. His hand instinctively moved to his pocket, where a small folding knife rested. The subtle movement didn't escape the watchful eyes of the nearest agent. A warning was relayed through the earpieces of the security team, and within seconds, their positions tightened. Hands moved to concealed holsters, ready to act if necessary. Mark noticed the heightened alert and tensed, gripping the knife handle tightly. He shifted his weight as if preparing to stand, his body coiled like a spring. "Stop!" Trump's commanding voice cut through the tense air. The abruptness of his tone froze everyone in place. Security agents paused, waiting for further instruction, while Mark, startled, turned his attention to Trump. Slowly, deliberately, Trump unwound the scarf covering his face, revealing his identity. Mark's eyes widened in shock. You're Donald Trump," he stammered, his grip on the knife loosening. Trump offered a small smile. "Yes, I am. But that's not important right now. What matters is you, and what you've been through." Mark blinked, struggling to process the revelation. Around them, the security team relaxed slightly, though their eyes remained trained on the pair. The nearest agent approached cautiously, removing the knife from Mark's hand. "Stand down," Trump instructed the agent, his tone firm yet calm. "That's enough. Return to your positions." Reluctantly, the agent stepped back, signaling the rest of the team to resume their original stances. Mark slumped back onto the bench, his hands trembling, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline coursing through him. "Why? Why would you want to talk to me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Trump leaned forward, his tone softening. "Because you deserve to be heard. You've clearly been through more than most people could ever imagine. So tell me, what brought you here?" Mark hesitated, unsure if he could open up to someone he had just met, let alone a public figure like Trump. But something in Trump's demeanor, his genuine curiosity, his unwavering attention, made Mark take a deep breath and begin. "It all started when I was called to serve," Mark said, his voice distant as though he were speaking from the depths of his memories. "I had just gotten married. Emily, my wife. She didn't want me to go. She begged me to stay, said it was too soon. But duty, it wasn't something I could ignore." Trump remained silent, his expression thoughtful as Mark continued. "She tried to be strong for me, but I could see the pain in her eyes every time we talked about it. And when I left for Afghanistan, she wrote me every week, telling me she was fine, that she was proud of me. I'd write back, promising her I'd come home." He paused, his breath visible in the freezing air. "But there were nights I wasn't so sure I'd make it back." Mark's voice wavered as he recounted his time overseas. "Afghanistan was harder than anything I could have prepared for. The heat, the danger, the constant vigilance. It wears you down. We were sent to protect a small village that was under threat from an insurgent attack. Intel said it was going to be bad, but we didn't realize how bad until it was too late." Trump leaned in slightly, his brow furrowed. "What happened?" Mark looked down at his hands as though reliving the moment. "We were ambushed. Gunfire, explosions. Everything was chaos. My unit was pinned down. I couldn't leave them there. So I went back, straight into the fire to pull them out." A tear rolled down his cheek as he spoke. "That's when it happened. A blast sent shrapnel into my leg. I thought it was over, but I couldn't stop. I dragged them to safety. Every step felt like my last, but I couldn't let them down." Trump exhaled, visibly moved. "You saved them," he said softly. Mark nodded. "I did, but it came at a cost. I was airlifted out and spent months in the hospital. Multiple surgeries. The Army said I wasn't fit to serve anymore. Just like that, my career, my identity was gone." Trump sat back, absorbing the weight of Mark's words. "And when you got home?" Mark's face darkened. "Emily, she couldn't take it. She said the distance, the worry, it had broken her. She left, and I had nothing left, no family, no career, just medical bills piling up. I sold everything I had to keep up with the treatments. But even then, it wasn't enough. My leg never healed properly, and the limp made finding work impossible." He looked at Trump, his voice breaking. "I've been on the streets ever since, just trying to survive. And some days, it feels like even that's too much." Trump sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Mark's story settling heavily in the cold night air. Around them, the security team maintained a respectful distance, their sharp gazes still scanning the surroundings for potential threats. "You gave everything for this country," Trump finally said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And yet, this country has failed you." Mark looked away, ashamed of his circumstances. "It's just how it is," he murmured. "Life isn't fair." "No," Trump replied firmly. "It isn't fair, but that doesn't mean we can't fix what's broken." Trump reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "This ends tonight," he said as he dialed a number. Mark watched in quiet confusion as Trump waited for the call to connect. "Elon," Trump said warmly into the phone. "It's Donald. I need a favor." Mark's eyes widened in disbelief. "Elon? As in Elon Musk?" Trump continued, his tone calm but resolute. "I'm sitting here with a man named Mark. He's an Afghanistan veteran, a hero, but life hasn't been kind to him. He's on the streets right now trying to survive. I want to change that." There was a pause as the person on the other end of the line responded. "Yes," Trump said, nodding as though the person could see him. "I'm asking you to give him a job, Tesla's security division. He's a natural leader, someone who knows what it means to protect others." Another pause. Mark could barely breathe as he listened. "Great. I knew I could count on you," Trump said, a smile breaking across his face. "We'll make sure he gets to California safely. And Elon, thank you." Trump ended the call and turned to Mark, his expression softening. "Elon Musk just offered you a position in Tesla's security team. You'll have housing, medical care, everything you need to get back on your feet." Mark stared at Trump, stunned into silence. Tears welled in his eyes as he struggled to find the words. You're serious? This is really happening?" Trump placed a reassuring hand on Mark's shoulder. "It's happening. You've earned this, Mark, and more." Mark broke down, covering his face with his hands. "I don't know how to thank you," he whispered. Trump gave a small smile. "Don't thank me. Just prove everyone wrong. Show them what you're capable of." He stood, signaling to his security team. "Get Mark to a hotel for the night. Make sure he's comfortable and has everything he needs. Tomorrow, we'll arrange his travel to California." Mark was helped into a waiting SUV by the security team. As the vehicle pulled away, he glanced back at Trump, who stood watching. For the first time in years, Mark felt a glimmer of hope. Trump returned to the bench, his gaze fixed on the city lights in the distance. He murmured to himself, "Sometimes, all it takes is one chance to change everything." The security team remained close but silent, giving Trump his space. To them, it was just another night on the job. But for Trump, and for Mark, it was a night that would be remembered forever. The next morning, Mark woke up in a warm bed for the first time in years. The hotel room was simple but comfortable, a stark contrast to the cold, unforgiving streets he had grown accustomed to. He sat up, the events of the previous night rushing back to him. Was it real? Did Donald Trump truly intervene in his life and set a new path for him? Moments later, there was a knock at the door. A member of Trump's security team entered, carrying a travel itinerary and a set of new clothes. "Good morning, Mr. Mark," the agent said with a friendly tone. "You're scheduled to fly out to California this afternoon. Mr. Trump wanted me to make sure you had everything you needed." Mark stared at the agent, still in disbelief. This is actually happening," he muttered, his voice filled with awe. "It is," the agent confirmed. "And Mr. Trump asked me to remind you, the hardest battles lead to the strongest warriors." Mark dressed quickly, his hands trembling with a mix of nerves and excitement. He looked in the mirror, seeing someone who hadn't dared to hope in years. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he wasn't defined by his struggles, but by his resilience. At the airport, Mark was met with first-class treatment. As he boarded the plane, he clutched the envelope containing his new employment details and housing arrangements. The flight attendants greeted him warmly, and he felt a sense of dignity he hadn't known in years. Meanwhile, back in Philadelphia, Trump sat in his office reflecting on the previous night. His team had already received updates on Mark's progress, and he felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. He turned to one of his aides. "You know," Trump began, "people think power is about making deals or winning elections. But real power? It's in moments like these, when you can take someone who's been overlooked, forgotten, and give them the chance they deserve." The aide nodded, understanding the weight of Trump's words. "Mark is a hero," Trump continued. "And heroes shouldn't be living in the shadows. If we don't take care of people like him, then what are we even doing as a country?" As the day progressed, news of Trump's gesture began to spread. A few witnesses from the market had shared the story online, their posts going viral. While some praised Trump for his actions, others criticized it as a publicity stunt. But Trump paid no attention to the noise. He knew his intentions were genuine, and that was enough. Hours later, Mark landed in California. At the airport, a Tesla representative was waiting to greet him. The representative handed Mark a folder with further instructions and a warm smile. "Welcome to Tesla, Mr. Mark," they said. Mark felt a surge of emotion as he stepped out into the California sun. The warmth on his face was a stark contrast to the cold Philadelphia streets he had left behind. Over the next few weeks, Mark settled into his new role at Tesla's security division. He poured his heart into his work, proving his worth and earning the respect of his colleagues. His medical treatments began, and with time, he started to regain his physical strength. Back in Philadelphia, Trump received regular updates on Mark's progress. One evening, as he sat alone in his study, he thought about the countless others like Mark who might never get their chance. He picked up his phone and began drafting a new initiative, a nationwide program to support veterans transitioning back to civilian life. For Trump, Mark's story wasn't just a one-time act of kindness, it was a call to action. As Mark continued to thrive in his new life, he often thought back to that fateful night in Philadelphia. He knew he would never forget the man who saw him in his darkest moment and gave him a second chance. And for Trump, the memory of Mark's gratitude served as a reminder of the power of compassion. In a world often dominated by division and indifference, small acts of humanity could still create ripples of change. The story of a market, a struggling veteran, and a man with the power to make a difference became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the profound impact of giving someone a reason to hope again.